You know, a question often comes up in industry analysis about industry boundaries. You know, how narrow should I go? How broad should I go? This is always a matter of convenience and judgment, and the crucial thing to do is to be consistent in your assessment of industry average profits, your analysis of the five forces, and then later, when you get to thinking about competitive position, to compare your organization, the organization that you're studying, with the industry as you've defined it. So it's a matter of convenience and judgment. This framework is flexible enough to accommodate any reasonable industry definition that you might come up with here. If you tend to go toward the narrow side, then the bulk of an analysis may come up under the threat of entry and the threat of substitution. So let's say, for example, we're studying the banking business. If I think of the industry that I'm studying as, let's say, a Canadian retail banking, then a substitute would be Canadian investment banking, Canadian mutual fund management, also putting money across the border. United States banking would be an alternative or a substitute to Canadian retail banking. The threat of entry would be, of course, from international rivals, but also from Canadian financial institutions that are not in banking, that are specialists, say, in investment management, perhaps seeking to get into Canadian retail banking here. And the risk, if I go very narrow, is that I'm not thinking about these competitors when I do my five forces analysis. Now, to my mind, that risk is relatively low compared to the risk of going too broad. I told you earlier that I often get discouraged when I encounter reports such as the future of financial services here. I think it's just too broad. What you're doing, if you're looking at, say, a Canadian retail bank and you're thinking about its industry too broadly as the entire financial services sector, is that in the next step, when you get to competitive position, you've got to compare your bank against every other financial institution that you considered in the industry in order to understand its position. And the real risk is failing to understand the opportunity here in the Canadian market. So all in all, what I'd like to ask you to do is to think about narrow industry boundaries and then ask the question, okay, if I broaden that industry definition, do I encounter the same customers, the same suppliers, the same rivals, the same substitutes? If so, then maybe I should broaden a little bit. You know, ultimately, though, it's a matter of convenience and judgment how you define your industry for analysis.